I told you guys I want to do more build in public type of updates, and I'm constantly thinking now about ways in which I can bridge my day-to-day workflow and thought process with stuff that might interest you and other people around here. And I want to do it in a more casual type of behind the scenes way. Nothing like super prepared or scripted. It's just you and me and a topic and some background music. And honestly, this comes from the realization that I wish a lot more people did this. I see a lot of finished products and end results, but I think a lot of the value in actually like building stuff and like publishing it online is also talking about the process that got you there in the first place and sort of the thought process that went into it. So this is what I aspire to do with you. So if you like it, let me know. And given that we recently launched the Voicepal beta to the App Store, I thought I would tell you a little bit about the design process that went behind the artwork. And what you're looking at is our super secret Figma file. And by the way, I'm trying to record this almost as if I'm recording a video for my teammates, for my team. So hopefully you get that vibe. And honestly, I think this is a really interesting one because, again, like I know a lot of people here, building cool software and shipping apps. And honestly, even for me, this was a bit of an afterthought. It was an afterthought when I worked on Pachanga, the beach volleyball app, a couple months ago. And it was now with Voicepal where we were like, okay, like we have the features, we have the functionality, we have the app ready. Now we want to go and publish this thing and share it with the world beyond having like a test flight. And then you start to, think about the requirements that Apple and Google give you to have the app published on their stores. And, part of that is having this artwork. So it feels like a nice to have because honestly, the first version that we actually launched to the App Store were just screenshots that I took from like this very own Figma file. I just kind of resized them a little bit to meet the dimension requirements and such. But then just one day before we actually did the sort of more like public beta launch, I thought, hey, this might actually just take 30 minutes or like an hour of my time, and it could actually look pretty nice. So why not do something better? So actually, I want to tell you a bit about the process here. And what we're looking at is essentially, the different screens that I worked on for this recent launch. But actually before this, what I actually want to take you through before we talk about the artwork itself is one suggestion, which is look at the stuff that already works, right? That's the first thing I did going into this. And one thing that I did is I took a bunch, I always like to take a bunch of screenshots of existing apps that are doing a fantastic job at either product design or marketing. And in this case, I was looking specifically at App Store images. And, here are some apps that I took inspiration from, in this case, from meditation apps, note-taking apps, documentation apps, productivity, because this is the type of vibe that we want to get into with Voicepal, trying to emulate a little bit of different sensations that people get when they are using these apps. So one takeaway is think about not just your direct market and competitors, but also apps that you feel might try to be inspiring similar emotions on your users, on the user base, and look at how they are marketing and positioning their work, right? So this was very much more of a visual exploration and kind of looking at the structure and what gets highlighted in these images. But anyway, from this process, I saw some patterns in terms of, how, for example, devices are placed, the relationship between the typography and the colors of the font here versus the background, and always having like plenty of contrast. Maybe here less so, but having always like plenty of contrast and making sure that the text on the image is like super readable. So as you can see, like across all of these, there's this like sort of like pattern of like you have the device in some capacity and the feature that's being described, and then you have like one sort of relatively big heading text which kind of tells you what this is all about. And I think across all of these, one big concept is that you have like I think up to like 10 slots, at least in the App Store, that you can publish images through. One of them can be video, and I've seen some apps do that as like the first, put that in the first slot. But usually, almost always, like always, this is telling a story, right? This is a chance for you, marketing touch point for you to, engage with your potential customer, somebody that is thinking about downloading the app. They've gotten all the way to the App Store, and they're just one tap away from actually trying your app for the first time. And so this is an opportunity for you to, figure out like what are the big things, right? Like what are the big features that you want to talk about, and you want to make sure you want to talk about them. How I like to think about it is like, don't sell me the feature, sell me what the feature can do for me, right? Like what is the underlying job to be done by the feature that is like adding value to my life. And so this also gives you an opportunity to think about, okay, I have these like 10 features or 5 features, but what actually are the takeaways for the user, right? Like once I use the app, how is my life going to be different? So, you got some examples here from, I really like Todoist. I've been a Todoist user for a long time. And they have titles like Organize Work and Life, finally, because this is hard and annoying, and it seems like this app actually helps you get there. It helps you become more productive, right? It doesn't tell you that the feature is that you can add to-dos to a to-do list, right? That would be sort of the feature, and you can add filters and deadlines and tags, but they don't talk about any of that. They just tell you that if you use Todoist, you will become more productive because you'll achieve more every day, right? You can collaborate with people. The feature is not, the feature is that you can add members to your team, but the outcome of that is collaboration. And so again, this is an opportunity for you to take your feature set and think about ways in which you can convey that through the perspective of communicating value to your users. So that's kind of what we try, it's what we try to do with Voicepal. And what you're seeing here is essentially the same image like over and over again, because when you are submitting these to the App Store, you have to provide a variety of dimensions. And so I created a frame for each of these. And so there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 types of display here. And there's also one because we apply for like iPad. So you can you can technically use like Voicepal for iPad, even though it's not like optimized for it. But you also provide like a dimension for that, for the 12.9 inch display in this case. And it is required of you that, I didn't know this, if you have like the iPad version, you have to also put like the iPad device, right? So if I remove the iPad and I put an iPhone here, this is not allowed, right? I mean, it might pass, but if Apple catches that you're using like a device that's not like directed at the audience that's like downloading this, they will take your app down. So be aware of that. So essentially for all of these, it's a really simple layout overall. I think like the focus was on like telling a story around like, first of all, having the main title be the sort of like big value prop that we wanted to communicate with this first release, which is we want to help people never miss out on their thoughts, on their best thoughts, right? And so this was the first tagline that we're using for the first image, because this is, the first image that people will see. So we want to use that real estate as well as we can to communicate, the most important piece of information. And we're also showing like a main screen with, all of your recordings and the record button. And so also to just convey the idea of generally what Voicepal looks like. And we do this across devices, right? I will tell you like about resizing in a little bit, because I think it's interesting. But then essentially what I did is I created a title for each sort of like feature set or like outcome set, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, it starts with make sure you never miss your best thought, and it continues through, in this case, the customer journey of somebody using Voicepal, but communicated through the lens of outcomes. So, and I think here we can still do a better job, because like many of these are like still very feature oriented texts compared to what I just showed you here. I think that's like a work in progress for us. But because we, in this particular case, we don't have that many features, so there's not like that many outcomes. But I guess at this point we had like more features than outcomes. So in order for us to like take like more real estate here, it was more like feature driven. But still, like we tried to keep it like relatively outcome oriented. So for example, this one, we have basically this like generator that takes your idea, your thought, and you can turn it into anything, right? It's essentially like you describe what you want, and then it takes your idea or your recording, and it gives you an output of sort of like a remix. And so the kind of like way to describe that is, hey, you can convert your thought into literally anything, right? And literally, we use like words like very meticulously here to convey, the level of like expansion that you can literally do anything. So, I think especially when you play with like relatively larger typography, like larger fonts in this like limited like width for the screen, you're gonna wanna also like be very mindful of the words that you choose to display here. Because like, as you can see, I can only fit like 2 to 3 words per line. So you can't just type anything. So what I did is I tried to use as few words as possible, and then highlight in a color tone that is still like quite contrasty with the background. I try to highlight the words that are like more relevant. So if you're just like skimming through, which is what a lot of people do, we don't really read that much. So at least you get to see like the big words, right? And you sort of like get an idea of what's going on. So that's around just like wording and the overall layout, as you can see. And yeah, it just continues through. So this is I'm literally taking you through a customer journey, right? Like a flow, right? So as you can see, we get people to like record something. So you record your on-the-go thoughts. You get automatic transcripts and summaries as soon as you've recorded and that recording has processed. And there you can see what that looks like. And then right after, you can take that thought and turn it into anything. So that's that. And if you tend to turn your thoughts all the time into like similar formats, you can have what we call presets. So this is like very sort of like outcome oriented. Like you can speed up the formatting if you're always like formatting to, let's say, a tweet thread or a Slack message, if that's what you use Voicepal for. Then you can have these presets to make that sort of like process faster. So that is the flow, right? You can see the customer journey sort of explained through the artwork. And then lastly, I leveraged the last section to mention that this is a like cross-device app, meaning that we also have a companion web app for our pro users. So this also like, it's a nice wrap up because it shows you that like you can take what you do on your phone and continue it on your desktop to some capacity. So I thought this would be like a nice way to like finish things off. Now, in terms of the resizing and how this actually works out in Figma and some tips for that, it's worth mentioning that in Figma, you have a bunch of these frames, like phone frames, available directly in Figma. So you don't have to think about like, oh, what were the dimensions for like the 6.5 inch, right? These are usually mostly on Figma. But then if not, you can go to the apple.com resources with the publishing guidelines and see what those dimensions are and just like manually work on them. Here, I think I'm even like have a little typo here with the frame title, because this should be a different display. But anyway, that's one thing. And then in terms of this one, I think this one's an interesting one because actually I have honestly not that much of an idea of how Voicepal looks like on the iPad, even though we had to do like iPad compatible screens. So what I actually did is, by the way, all of these have like these like handy iPad and iPhone mocks, the device mocks with the bezels. I took these from the Figma community from people who have worked on this stuff, and it looks fantastic. And I also added a little shadow across it, actually like multiple shadows for a little bit of depth, which I think looks pretty good. And so what I did to actually resize things to the iPad, we can take this one as an example, is I took the phone, right? Let's just like drag it here so we can see it on the black screen. And I took the iPad, right? So this iPad was obviously originally blank. So you can see that essentially this is a frame containing the screen, which is like a locked layer with an image. So that's actually the bezels. And then there's the actual frame with the filling, right? So that gives you that like gray background. So essentially what I did, and this is because I am using auto layout across my design, is actually, well, not here because this is an image version of the app. Let me actually pause it. I'll bring you some like different assets. Okay, so I accidentally finished the Loom video instead of pausing it because I clicked on the wrong button. That, tells you how fluent I am with using Loom. But anyway, so I have here what I wanted to show you. This is I took an actual screen from our design page, and I can't show you this one just yet because we have some, ongoing work that still needs refining. So I still took this one, right? So essentially what I do is, first of all, actually, let's put it in this order. I take the screen, I roughly match it to the, put it side by side with the iPhone. And well, in this case, the height is a little bit larger because it's like trying to cover like more content. I think the usual is like 852 or 850, something like that. That's more or less the dimension of the iPhone screen in this case. And what I do is I press the key, the K key for like activating the scale function here on Figma. And I hold my shift key and I just bring it down. So I'm essentially scaling the frame as far as, more or less the size of the iPhone frame. And obviously, how well this works will depend on your use of layering and the frames and how that all works out. As you can see, I got some bugs here because in this case, I have like a fixed status bar and home indicator. I don't actually need these, so I can remove them for the time being. But if you also wanted to scale those, you would have to adjust the positioning here, whether they're like fixed or not. So, now we have something that more or less matches this screen. So that's pretty good. And, essentially I'm copy pasting, this would be something like, if I had to like bring this up, it would look something like this, right? So now we have something that's like good for this screen. So essentially what I did is I went one step forward or one step ahead and, took this and literally, well, except the background, so not the entire frame, I copied the content itself and I pasted it here, right? And here what you have to do is, I guess, not clipping content. I'm not sure how I did this one. Oh, well, because this one is not overreaching. You can't really clip content here because the image itself is like the bezels are going out of the frame. So you would have to do, play around with that. I guess you could, in this case, if you wanted to fit this without doing like other types of controls and configurations, what you could do is you can add like a wrapper frame. So we can just call this wrapper, put it on the screen without touching the bezels. We can have this one be clip content and then take the cards and put it in the wrapper. So now you can see that this kind of goes in nicely, just like so. So that's pretty much it. Then you can, discuss whether like you want to have actually like a wider width, for example. In this case, what I did is I made things like a whole lot wider to leverage the real estate of the iPad screen. So again, if you're using auto layout, hopefully this works out quite nicely. I can just hold my option key and drag to the left, and things are resizing quite nicely. So as you can see, it all works out. You can position this wherever you want, and it's gonna look pretty good. I think just for, if you just have like a few minutes and you want to get this done, you can do that, and it works out quite nicely. So yeah, that's essentially a little bit about the resizing, which is like just another tip if you have to like very quickly reconfigure your current design and make it cross device and stuff like that for different devices. So that's pretty much it, and I think there's nothing else I want to cover in this video, so that is all. If you watched all the way, thank you for watching. I know this is a tweet, and tweets are meant to be shorter, but I thought I would just give this a try and see who's going to tap in and listen. So if you did, I really appreciate that, and just know that I'll be posting more of these, so keep an eye out, and let me know if you like it. Send me a DM if there's stuff that you have any questions on, or you want to like touch base on that you want me to like follow up on, and I'll happily get to that in like future videos or future tweets. All right, thanks for watching.